Before the jungles burned and the skies filled with bombers, Vietnam was a land of quiet power, a narrow country of mountains, rivers, and seas. A land where legend and labor walked hand in hand. To the north, the Red River Delta spread like a green fan beneath the shadow of the mountains, a cradle of wet rice civilization older than many of the world's empires. Here, the people shaped their destiny through water, taming floods, building dikes, and worshipping the land that fed them. To the south lay the Mekong Delta, vast, fertile, and restless. Each season, its waters rose and fell, carving new paths through the mud and mangrove. For centuries, its people followed the rhythm of the monsoon, growing rice and stories in equal measure. Between these two great deltas stretched 1,000 miles of coastline. Beaches where fishermen cast their nets before dawn, where traders once brought silk from China and spices from Malacca. This was a land forged by endurance, a land that had learned, over 1,000 years of invasion and resistance, how to survive. For nearly a millennium, Vietnam had lived in the long shadow of China. Dynasty after dynasty ruled from the north, and yet the Vietnamese never forgot who they were. They absorbed their conquerors' ideas, their language, their philosophies, their systems of government, and then made them their own. From these centuries of struggle grew a national soul defined not by conquest, but by resilience. Vietnam did not build vast empires, it endured them. And when the age of Western imperialism dawned in the 19th century, that endurance would once again be tested. By the 1850s, the ships of France appeared on the horizon. Their hulls of iron and guns of steel glistened in the tropical sun. They came with missionaries and merchants, and with them, the certainty of European destiny. The French called it la mission civilisatrice, the civilizing mission. They spoke of progress, of enlightenment, of roads and schools and order. But beneath that rhetoric lay a simpler motive, profit. The empire's hunger for land and resources would reshape the Vietnamese world. In 1887, France formally bound Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos into a single entity, l'Union Indochinoise, or French Indochina. It was to be the Pearl of the East, a colony to rival India or Java. Saigon became its showcase, a city of wide boulevards, cafes, and French villas, called the Paris of the Orient. But beyond the polished streets, the countryside told another story of debt, famine, and servitude. The French built plantations where Vietnamese peasants labored under foreign overseers. Rubber, coffee, and rice flowed out to Europe. Taxes rose, and hunger deepened. Entire families sold their labor for a handful of coins. The Vietnamese were forbidden to form political parties, restricted from higher education, and banned from holding most administrative posts. A handful of local collaborators, landlords and mandarins, grew rich serving French interests. For the rest, there was only silence. In the schools, children recited French history and geography, the Alps, the Seine, Napoleon, but learned little of their own kings or heroes. In the courts, a Frenchman's word outweighed that of any native. And on the walls of Saigon's grand hotels, signs warned, interdit auxiliary Annamites, no Vietnamese allowed. Yet no empire, however confident, can erase memory. In the countryside, stories of ancient resistance endured, of generals who had driven out Chinese armies, of farmers who fought invaders with bamboo spears. These tales were told quietly, under thatched roofs and moonlight, waiting for the day they might matter again. By the dawn of the 20th century, they began to matter indeed. The world was changing. Japan's victory over Russia in 1905 shattered the myth of European invincibility. If one Asian nation could defeat a Western power, why not another? Across Vietnam, whispers of reform grew into murmurs of rebellion. Students gathered in secret circles, pamphlets circulated under candlelight. Two men emerged as early voices of nationalism, Phan Bai Chao and Phan Chau Trinh. Phan Bai Chao believed independence could be won only through revolution and foreign alliances. He sought Japanese help, envisioning a modern, militarized Vietnam. Phan Chau Trinh, meanwhile, argued for education and gradual reform, a new Vietnam built through enlightenment, not arms. Both men would be arrested, exiled, and silenced, but their ideas would survive. Even within the colonial bureaucracy, a few idealists began to question France's right to rule. Vietnamese clerks, interpreters, and teachers saw the contradictions daily: liberty and equality preached, yet denied. In Paris, the world's powers spoke of self-determination and democracy. But in the villages of Indochina, peasants still bowed to their colonial masters. The hypocrisy was impossible to ignore. World War I brought new opportunities and new disillusionment. Tens of thousands of Vietnamese were sent to Europe as soldiers and laborers. They dug trenches in France, carried ammunition, and worked in factories. There, they saw a world beyond the colony, a world where ordinary men debated politics freely, where revolution and democracy were not just dreams. When they returned home, they carried those ideas with them like hidden weapons. The war that had been fought for the freedom of nations left Indochina unchanged, still ruled, still exploited, still voiceless. But in the aftermath, one young man in exile began to see a path forward, a man who would one day reshape Vietnam's destiny. His name was Nguyen Sinh Cung, though the world would come to know him as Ho Chi Minh. At the close of the Great War, Ho was in Paris, a dishwasher by day, a political activist by night. He wrote letters to the Allied leaders demanding independence for Vietnam, invoking the same principles they claimed to defend. No one answered. Disillusioned, he turned to socialism and communism, ideologies that promised liberation for the oppressed. In Moscow and later China, he studied revolution, organization, and propaganda. He became a man of many names and many disguises, but one purpose: freedom for Vietnam. By the time the world plunged again into war in 1939, Ho Chi Minh's dream was no longer a whisper in exile. It was a movement waiting to return home. The French Empire, confident and proud, would soon face its own collapse. The storm of global war was gathering once more, and in its chaos, the old order in Indochina would crumble. For the Vietnamese, the age of foreign masters was nearing its end. But before freedom came, there would be famine, fire, and betrayal. The fall of empire had begun.